The political stage in America is once again lit with tension and anticipation as former President Donald Trump pushes a high-stakes battle to the nation's Supreme Court. His demand is clear. He wants the highest court in the land to uphold his emergency tariffs, a move he argues is essential to keep America strong on the world stage. But behind this legal fight lies not just a clash of political ideologies, but a struggle that could reshape international trade, global markets, and the way nations interact with each other in the age of economic nationalism. What Trump is asking for is not just a legal ruling, it's a statement of how much power the president should hold when making decisions that affect every corner of the world. To understand why this moment matters, we need to step back and explore the roots of tariffs, their impact on everyday life, and why the Supreme Court's decision could ripple far beyond American shores. A tariff, in its simplest form, is a tax placed on imported goods. When a government imposes tariffs, it makes foreign products more expensive, pushing consumers to buy more local products. Supporters argue tariffs are a shield, protecting domestic industries from foreign competition, creating local jobs, and fueling national pride. But critics warn that tariffs can also backfire, leading to higher prices for everyday consumers, triggering retaliation from other countries, and ultimately starting trade wars that hurt everyone involved. This is exactly the dynamic that played out during Trump's presidency when he imposed sweeping tariffs on steel, aluminum, and products from China under the justification of national security and emergency powers. His argument was straightforward. Foreign countries, especially China, were exploiting America's open markets, threatening not just jobs, but the long-term security of the nation. By using emergency powers, he bypassed Congress and imposed tariffs unilaterally. Now the question is whether the Supreme Court will say that a president has that much authority. For Trump, this case is not just about economics, it's about his political legacy and future ambitions. He has built his identity on being a tough negotiator who never backs down, especially when it comes to foreign powers. By defending these emergency tariffs, Trump can show his supporters that he is still fighting to protect American jobs and industries. But beyond the political theater, the stakes are much higher. The Supreme Court's decision will set a precedent. Can presidents, without approval from Congress, impose sweeping tariffs that reshape the global economy? Or must there be checks on this kind of unilateral decision-making? This is where the drama deepens. Because trade disputes are not just technical arguments about numbers. They are deeply human stories, affecting farmers, workers, families, and entire communities across the globe. Take, for example, Muslim-majority countries that rely heavily on exports to the United States. Nations like Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Bangladesh have significant industries tied to American markets. Turkish steel producers, Pakistani textile manufacturers, and Bangladeshi garment workers all depend on fair access to U.S. consumers. When tariffs are imposed, these industries suffer, prices rise, and jobs are lost in regions that are already struggling with economic hardship. For Muslim families in these countries, many of whom already live paycheck to paycheck, the ripple effects of American tariffs can mean less income, fewer opportunities, and more poverty. Trump's emergency tariffs, while aimed at protecting American industries, have unintentionally punished communities abroad, especially in Muslim countries that lack the economic power to retaliate effectively. Yet at the same time, Trump's supporters argue that these measures are necessary. They claim that without tariffs, American workers face unfair competition from countries with lower wages and fewer regulations. For them, tariffs are a matter of survival in a global economy that is stacked against the working class. And this is where the debate becomes complicated. Do you prioritize protecting local jobs in America, or do you consider the global consequences, including the hardships faced by vulnerable populations abroad? The Supreme Court will not directly weigh these moral questions, but its ruling will determine whether presidents can continue using emergency powers to act quickly in matters of trade, regardless of international impact. When we break down the legal side of this case, the key issue is presidential authority. The U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. However, over the decades, Congress has passed laws that give presidents leeway to act in times of crisis. Trump used one of these laws to justify his tariffs, arguing that foreign steel and aluminum imports threatened national security. His critics argue this was a misuse of emergency powers, essentially turning a trade dispute into a security issue. If the Supreme Court sides with Trump, it means future presidents, Republican or Democrat, could impose tariffs whenever they deem it necessary, with little oversight. If the court rules against him, it could rein in presidential authority and restore more power to Congress. Either way, the ruling will reshape the balance of power in American governance. Now, let's consider how this ties into the global economy. Tariffs do not exist in a vacuum. When the U.S. imposes tariffs, other countries often retaliate with their own, targeting American farmers, tech companies, or manufacturing industries. During Trump's trade wars, for example, China imposed retaliatory tariffs that hit U.S. soybean farmers hard, leaving them struggling to find markets for their crops. Similarly, European countries raised tariffs on American goods, escalating tensions. In this sense, tariffs become a weapon in global politics, with everyday people paying the price. In Muslim-majority countries, the fallout can be particularly harsh because many of these economies are dependent on exports like textiles, garments, and raw materials. A simple tariff increase in Washington can mean thousands of job losses in Karachi, Dhaka, or Istanbul. It is also important to remember that tariffs are not just about economics. They are also about values and trust. When one country raises tariffs, it signals a breakdown in cooperation and partnership. For Muslim-majority countries, which already face challenges like political instability, poverty, and discrimination in global markets, tariffs can feel like yet another barrier to achieving equality and fair treatment. They reinforce the sense that the global system favors the rich and powerful while leaving weaker nations struggling. For many Muslims, this becomes a question of justice. Why should communities in Pakistan or Turkey pay the price for decisions made in Washington or Beijing? Why should their livelihoods be sacrificed in the name of political gamesmanship? These are not abstract questions. They affect real lives, real families, and real futures. At the same time, it's worth noting that tariffs can sometimes empower local industries in Muslim countries. For example, if the U.S. imposes tariffs on Chinese goods, American buyers may look for alternative suppliers in places like Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Indonesia. This can create new opportunities for Muslim workers and exporters, provided they can meet demand and maintain competitiveness. So while tariffs often hurt smaller economies, they can also create openings. The challenge is whether these countries are equipped to seize them, especially when they lack infrastructure, financing, and political stability. As Trump pleads with the Supreme Court, the world is watching not just for the legal outcome, but for the broader message it sends. Will the court endorse a vision of America where presidents can act swiftly and unilaterally, reshaping trade on a global scale? Or will it insist on a more restrained approach, ensuring that Congress has a stronger voice in decisions that impact the world economy? For Trump's base, a victory would reinforce his image as a strong leader who doesn't wait for permission to act. For his critics, it would represent a dangerous expansion of presidential power, one that undermines democratic checks and balances. The implications stretch far beyond America. In Muslim-majority countries, policymakers are already bracing for the potential outcomes. If the court sides with Trump, they know that tariffs could become a permanent tool of American trade policy, making their exports less competitive and creating instability in industries that employ millions of workers. If the court reins in this authority, there may be more stability and predictability in global trade, offering some relief to struggling economies. Either way, this legal battle highlights how interconnected the world has become. Decisions made in Washington reverberate in Karachi, Dhaka, Istanbul, and Jakarta, shaping the futures of communities that have little say in the matter. This is what makes the story of Trump's emergency tariffs so compelling. On the surface, it may look like a dry legal dispute about trade law and presidential power, but underneath, it is a human story about workers, families, and nations trying to survive in an increasingly uncertain global economy. It is about the balance between protecting local jobs and honoring global responsibilities. It is about the clash between nationalism and international cooperation. And for Muslims around the world, it is about the ongoing struggle to find fairness in a system that too often marginalizes their voices.